What's up, man? How are you?
How's it going? Yeah, good, good. Just trying to keep the family chaos away from my office.
Yeah, I've got an empty house for the weekend, so I've got two kids, so I'm
Nice and quiet.
absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So I reached out to you. I found you on Reddit, and as I mentioned to you briefly last night, the reason I'm really now going through Reddit and trying to dig through all the comments is to see what other stories are out there in regards to some type of correlation with strokes and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And I have a number of articles that I've already posted. So after my stroke, there was an article in Jiu Jitsu Times, and then a couple people read that one, and then they started reaching out to me because they had recently had strokes around, and that's been snowballing since my story. So basically, like I mentioned, it's almost every quarter I'll get a message on Facebook on the Messenger or an email on YouTube, somebody just saying, hey, I read your story, something similar happened to me, really happy that things are going well, and a lot of people are just looking for more. I don't know if it's support or just they want to hear, who else has this happened to people, who else has this happened to, and are they back on the mats training? So,
Yeah.
so during this whole process, I've been on a few podcasts. I've had people reach out to those podcasts. So, I mean, it's coming from everywhere, all over the world. People are finding, like I said, they're either finding me on YouTube, on Medium, through a podcast, through a friend who sent them a link, through Dr. Google or whoever, and Reddit has. So I've been going through Reddit because trying to dig out. I've got a list of people that have contacted me, but now I've seen your name on Reddit a few times, and I've been very deep in about 3 of those conversations. So I reached out to you because it sounds like you had something similar happen to you, and I want to hear more about your story,
Sure.
and then just kind of take it from there.
Yeah. Okay.
So where are you from?
I'm currently in Corvallis, Oregon, which
Okay.
is about an hour north of Eugene. And I was in Eugene when this happened, and I had been training Muay Thai for close to 2 decades, and it had done a little bit of ground stuff, but got injured pretty quickly often, and so really hadn't taken up jiu-jitsu seriously until my mid to late 30s.
How old are you? How old are you right now?
I'm 44 right now.
And so today is July 21st, 2019.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and this and so I really kind of started seriously, training 3 or 4 times a week in late 2011, and was still a white belt. Was just drilling some bow and arrow chokes, and I felt a little bit of a crunch in my neck, but it was kind of an adjustment that just happens all the time, later that night, my neck was kind of stiff. It felt like I had 10 pillows under it, even though I didn't. It was just kind of like like I just got my neck tweaked a little bit. And then the next morning, I woke up and I had kind of like shimmering vision, like migraine, like in the top left, sort of 30% of my vision in both eyes, and a little bit of a headache. And I thought it might have been a migraine. I was dehydrated maybe, and so I stupidly, and this is the reason why I think men die, on average a lot younger than women, is I just kept doing what I was doing for, I don't know, 7 or 8 days. I was commuting to teach at my university, and I even remember telling my students, I have this weird thing in my vision. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
one night I was driving home, and I just decided, this is not going away. I called like the nurse line on my commute and said, who do I see about this? Do I go to a headache specialist? Do I go to a neck specialist? Do I go to an eye doctor? And she said, you need to go to the emergency room right now. And so I went in, had a CT scan, and they said, vertebral dissection, and I had a clot that went up into my visual cortex. So that was a shock, no idea that was even possible, really. And I was put on Coumadin and warfarin, blood thinners for, I think, 3 months, and had a follow-up CT, which the clot had dissolved and the artery had fixed itself.
How fast did that artery heal and fix itself?
About, I think, 3 months was I didn't have any follow-up between, so I don't know, how quickly it actually fixed, but I got the 100% clear diagnosis. So that was interesting. I first of all, I didn't know it could happen. Second of all, I didn't know it could heal so quickly. And I was told by everybody that, I shouldn't do that karate stuff anymore. But here I am.
Did they go like this too?
Yeah.
They usually
Here
do.
I am. I got put in a really tight triangle just like a couple nights ago and almost went out. I've been really careful about my neck. Like I don't let anybody get a hold of me really easily. So I'm much more sensitive to it, and I tap really early. But I also, I just feel like this is something, I get exercise, I get camaraderie, it keeps my mind active. I'm an old guy, and I can still like compete pretty. I don't compete anymore, but I can be competitive at a level where it's fun for me. It's just my adult play.
Yeah.
So I didn't want that to be taken from me. What I will say though, and I know you didn't ask, but it's likely going to come up. I don't know, maybe with others too. The kind of lingering part for me is that I developed quite a bit of anxiety about it.
Yep.
Like, it made me have this existential crisis. I was kind of like, fuck, I could have died from this. And there was a period of a couple years where, like, I was sensitive to the light afterwards. And there were a couple times where maybe I'd get dizzy or something else would be going on, and I'd be thinking, is this happening again?
Yes.
And again, my heart would start racing. I'd start having panic attacks, and that is the most lingering experience for me. Not any kind of physical, but the spiritual, emotional, all that stuff.
Yep.
Which is crazy because, I'm still doing jiu-jitsu, which is probably at one of the highest risks. But I also feel like it was a freak accident.
Well, so let's take it from here, and I want to rewind a little bit. So this happened in 2011, right?
2012.
It's gonna be a. You probably think about it all the time, I'm sure. Obviously, I had mine in 2017, and it's 2019. It's coming up on my 2-year anniversary in August, and it is on my mind every day. The anxiety that you speak of is real. And you're driving your kids around. You're wondering what would, because what would I do here? Or what would I do there? Or then I'm at the gym working out by myself, and I start freaking out. Like, well, what happens if I go down? And so it's real. I don't know if you heard too, Demian. Did you see the article about the 18-year-old Abu Dhabi champion in Brazil that just had a stroke?
Yeah.
Have you been? Do you follow him at all on Instagram or anything like that?
No.
Are you on Instagram?
No, okay. I'm not. It's just one of those things. Yeah,
I get it. But I've been following him on Instagram, so they have stories. So these guys are walking around with their cameras, and I watched his physical therapy all the way to last week. He had on a gi, and he was flipping somebody an arm bar, but it didn't look like he had much motion in his left side. That's been about Stroke Awareness Month was June, so he's probably 6 weeks in. I think he's going to make a recovery. You know, they got him in Brazil doing weights and PT and all that kind of stuff, and the kid's attitude, dude, he's always got a smile on his face. But it's ironic because I was on a couple podcasts during Stroke Awareness Month, which is actually May. I'm sorry, not June. And during the month of May, right after I got off the podcast for the BJJ mental coach, right after we did it, about a week later, because Gustavo, he was like, I really had never heard of this. I didn't know this could happen. And then I emailed him a week later and sent him the link. I'm like, did you see this 18-year-old Brazilian kid? And he said, I did. He's like, very sad. And so he asked me 2 weeks ago to fly out and speak to the Arizona Federation. And so there's, over 50 coaches from Arizona that get together to talk about, jiu-jitsu and politics aside, how to, better the community.
Nice.
So that's where I'm going out. That's why I started digging into Reddit. Now I've started, having to go out here in October, having that opportunity to go speak to these people, it's given me a fire up the butt to start making progress here. So I've got a couple interviews I just did last week. I haven't really released them yet, and they'll come out with the blog. So going back to Reddit, so 2012 you had the stroke. You can identify the fact that it came 2 days after basically that wicked triangle choke. That triangle choke is probably, well, my question to you is, if you could step back and rewind to that day, and then rewind even further, a month or 2 months, was there any type of sign or anything weird prior to that particular choke? A blurry vision or an infection? I didn't feel good. I didn't feel myself. I was dehydrated.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I probably had higher than average blood pressure when training. As a white belt, I personally really had a lot of, for a lot of people, and I see this still today, like it's anxiety invoking to have people like trying to make you go unconscious. And so I was, like anybody, a little spazzy, a little bit too concerned about what was going to happen or whatever. But there was no precursor. I was in perfect health. I was in really good shape. And I feel like I can directly link it to that one bow and arrow, the crunch that I felt and the neck pain after.
So how many hours after did the neck pain come in?
It was pretty immediate. I mean, it was like, I kind of tweaked my neck. But to separate that out from all the other times you tweak your neck in jiu-jitsu, it didn't make me feel like, oh, this is serious. It's like, oh, I kind of hurt my neck a little bit today, and I'm going to have to deal with that.
In the vertebral, you got to say it for me again, because sometimes I have my speech issues.
Sure.
Vertebral artery?
Yeah, vertebral, like vertebrae.
Vertebrae.
It's the one that's further back. So
okay.
The cardioid or whatever, and then the vertebral artery is a little bit further back. And they're redundant. So there's two of them. And so what one of the doctors said is that often they'll do CT scans on people and one is fully blocked without them even knowing it, because the other one still feeds that part of the brain.
So they work together?
They work together. But the problem was not that I had the dissection, but the dissection created a clot that traveled up. And apparently, where you see is in the back of your brain. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jesus. So have you been in a bow and arrow choke since?
Yeah, I just tap super fast.
Once they get the grip,
yeah.
you just
yeah, I don't need to follow that see where that's gonna go.
Yeah, no, I agree. So
Yeah.
how often do you train since the accident?
You know, just anywhere from 2 to 5 days a week. So yeah,
So
I continue to train.
You're still.
I'm a slow learner. I'm still at purple. You know, I'm like, and I'm old, so I take it easy. I'm not. It's not about for me. It's about doing it when I'm 80. It's not being good now.
Yeah.
So I'm not in a hurry to, you know, I don't compete because I think there's just the variables in competition are different.
It is.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
like $100 to tap when somebody gets a grip on your neck is probably just not worth it. You know what I mean?
and just the speed and the really like, you know, competitive element there. I have a little more control over training.
100%.
Yeah.
That's the position I'm in. You know, I'm happy just being on the mats and not being paralyzed anymore, and happy to be coaching, and you know, can still keep it competitive, just like you said, for the other guys I roll with, and can still, you know, you're still a purple belt, so you can still control the white belts and the blue belts for the most part, you know, without putting yourself in too much danger. And when you roll with the browns and the blacks, they should already know that you have some sensitivity, and you know, if they're good, upstanding citizens, they're probably not going to try to kill your neck. And so, I mean, that's how I even with people who I roll differently with everybody. You know how many bow and arrows I could rip off of somebody if I really wanted to, but I'll have it, and I was like, you know, I'm going to move on, and I'll get it, and we call it catch and release. We do it. We do it with the kids too. We'll be like, catch and release, guys, catch and release.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's part of where I think that more education on this and more stories, you know, put out there, because people are so, from what I've seen on Reddit, to be honest with you, people are very, this is fluke, very, very rare, not going to happen. And I think fine that I hope that's the case.
Yeah.
According to the messages that I'm getting and the amount of people that these people who are commenting, I can guarantee you they're not researching like I am. They're not spending 10 hours a week on the internet like I am.
Yeah. So here's a suggestion. You know, because I was talking to my wife about after we talked last night, and she's getting her PhD in public health, it's really about research methodology. She said what you should do is get an epidemiologist to just run some numbers, to just do a small study on, you know, a small sample of people that do jiu-jitsu, you know, and then compared with a control group that doesn't. And you can you're likely to prove statistically that there's a higher chance in jiu-jitsu. And so there you have some power behind your argument instead of all these anecdotes. Right?
Yeah, right.
Because you can collect anecdotes, and that's really where a lot of interesting science comes from. It's like, oh, I'm hearing that this happens here and here and here. But if you can crunch some numbers and get somebody to look at it and say, you know what, there's a higher risk, we can show that statistically, then you have some, like, you know, it's not just the stories, but it's also that sort of math behind it.
Absolutely.
I think that would, you know, some people that might be dismissive, you can say, well,
here's the paper. I think, you know, and it's 100%. I think it has to go in that direction, and that's kind of where I feel like I'm trying to help get it to that point where it's like doing interviews like this, hearing the stories, and then again, you know, hopefully, I think this interview will probably help us find that epidemiologist who probably does jiu-jitsu. It's interesting. I actually had a doctor in the ER. He's an ER doctor. He actually did some research, found my articles, and was like, you know what, he said, he goes, you know, it sounds like this is something that, you know, could happen, and I've always wondered it myself, being an ER doctor, and so, you know, 100%. Now, going back to, I'm just going to pop up some. So you were the one who posted the article on Reddit, the it's triangle choke caused brain strokes, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yes. And you were the lucky idiot that will be okay, even though he didn't get a check, even though he didn't check a serious condition right away. Was that you?
Yeah, that was me.
Cool. So I'm gonna post that, but that also got a response from somebody. A similar thing happened to me, except it was a bow and arrow.
Oh wait, that's my comment.
That was your comment.
That was my comment. Yeah.
Okay. And then there was the guillotine brain stroke. Somebody had somebody new, and he had a guillotine. I think you may have made mention of yours on that as well. So I'm gonna post those all in the YouTube.
Cool.
And
there was an article a couple of years ago. A guy was training MMA, and I think the article was called "The Stroke." You might have seen it, but it was so bad the guy had to have part of his head taken out and put in his abdomen.
Was that Sean Eston guy?
I think that's it.
Was it on an ESPN article, maybe?
I think so. Yeah, it was something. Yeah.
Yeah. I read his. I followed him, and I've been keeping up with him as well. I haven't interviewed him yet, but that was one when I had my stroke in 2017. That was one of the first articles that I found. I reached out to him and just asked, some questions, but he never got back to me.
Okay.
But I feel, and that's that was kind of, people are busy, and they have lives, so I don't take it personally. But I remember that's where I feel like I've been a resource for a lot of guys. Just having the articles out there, they reach out to me. I'm like one of the first person that they reach out to, and I just try to stay as positive as I can. Say, hey, it's going to be fine. I know, because it feels like life is taken away from you. Your identity many times is built around jiu-jitsu, especially the community, the camaraderie, the friends, the outlet. And then
you just feel so vulnerable. You're used to being like somewhat, self-control and powerful,
king of the world. Yeah, just absolutely
weak, and it's a change in identity.
It is.
I think also one of the things that you might be able to offer people is, when something like this happens, you feel like it's a permanent condition. You feel like that's the new normal.
Yeah.
But with these stories of people that have recovered and are still training and stuff like that, you can hopefully shift some of that thinking to be like, well, this is a process, but it's likely going to be okay in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's where we can all so there's, I don't know if you're on Facebook, but there's a Facebook group.
Okay.
Are you on Facebook?
Yeah, I am.
All right, cool. Let's exchange. I'm Chris Martin on Facebook.
Okay. Same as my Skype username.
Okay, cool. So I'll find you, and then I want to invite you into the group.
Cool.
It's basically guys who train jiu-jitsu that have had similar accidents. A couple of them have vertebral, like you. A couple of them were dissections of the carotids. A couple of them were just strokes, and still trying to determine how, what, why, when.
Yeah.
So that's been a really good support group that we can all reach out to, and then a lot of guys are on there. Like, for example, there's one gentleman, Shane, and when we had our interview, he had been off the mats for 2 years, and then maybe more, maybe 3, I don't remember, but and then we had our interview, and he was like, yeah, I'm gonna start to get going. And then he was in the group, and then he was talking to people in the group, and everybody's giving him positive encouragement. And then next thing you know, it's like every time I see him on Facebook, he's checking into his gym. So
Nice.
I don't know if it was us or if it was him or if it was a combination or maybe whatever. It doesn't matter. The fact is, we were all there to support him during his transition. Because I think there's some insecurities, just like everybody's going to have. And then,
of course.
Yeah. So I think this is really important, and I really like the idea that you have that your wife came up with. That is the way to go, 100%. So I think this interview, like I said, I can use it to throw it out in the universe and find that. I'm sure there's somebody who trains jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? That's
well, not only that, but like my wife, there's a lot of people that like who know the math and statistics, but don't have an interesting problem. They're waiting for something to come along and be like, true. Yeah, okay, this is cool. Let's see if there's anything here, a signal here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I can even ask around. I mean, I think that an outcome of this obviously is making people who've had these injuries feel better and know that it's likely gonna be okay. But then, like you're talking about with this Arizona stuff, it's also probably important to let people know that this is possible.
Yeah.
And just how we've kind of changed, football and head trauma from that stuff, that there might be a need to kind of reassess. I know a lot of professors are, considerate about the chokes, but you know how it goes. Like in a live roll, some people will take it as far as they can, and people are passing out from chokes and stuff like that, which is likely we need to, I think if more people understood that this is a possibility, especially if there's some statistics behind it, there might be just a little bit more concern about the catch and release could be more of a protocol rather than just something that's a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah, right. Like, hey, somebody's. So I watched. So at my gym, I watched last week. I was sitting on the mats, and I was watching that there was a 23-year-old white belt going with a younger. He's probably 25. White belt. He's a Milwaukee cop, and they're both young 20s, just super take it, push it to the limit. I mean, they want to train. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They love it, and it's cool. But I'm sitting there watching it, and the cop put him in a triangle choke, had it all locked in, with the exception of he could have hooked the leg with his right hand.
Yeah.
And the other dude was like just stood up, just powered out of it.
Yeah.
Okay? And I mean, once he was out, it was like walked away and it's like, woof, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's like, it's impressive, it is. I mean, it's cool, that's how I used to train. That's how a lot of people train. I get it. That's the cool thing about jiu-jitsu. You can put yourself in situations, and it really feels good when you can fight out of them, But I looked over at his brother, and his brother was there the day that I had the stroke. And I said, he kind of looked at me, I'm looking at him, because it was tight. Like, he got out of it. It was like a fucking animal getting out of it,
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'm like, if he has any type of blurry vision later on, or any type of headaches or anything like that, he's got a dissection of his carotid artery, Jose. And Jose's kind of looking at me, and he's kind of like, okay. But, and maybe that's fucking off the wall shit, but hey, who cares? I'm bringing awareness to the fact that that's possible. And if dude later on they're at the family dinner table and he's talking about how he feels dehydrated and dizzy and all that kind of shit, maybe he doesn't want to go get it checked out. Maybe he's so fucking stubborn that he doesn't want to get it checked out. Maybe his family doesn't want to go get it checked out either. Fine. You know what? At least take it as a sign. You might have had a stroke. You might have had it, or you might not have had a stroke yet. You might have a dissection. So you might want to lay off the mats for a few weeks. But you're right, Damian. I mean, they have to get to the hospital, but you know how it is. Like a lot of these guys, like I read it. I read it on Reddit. Like off of some of these articles, and maybe it was off of one of them that you wrote. Like right after these articles, like dudes are like, yeah, now that I look back at it after practice, I went back home and I had a headache for 3 days and I was dizzy and all that. Whoa, I wonder if I was having a stroke. Shit like that. Like that's on Reddit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the possibility is, just like you said, there's a lot of naysayers on Reddit, and that's fine. I hope they're right. I hope to God they're right. I hope all of us have these weird pre-existing conditions, which most of us don't because the doctors, are telling us that we don't. but let's just say there's some rare form disease that we all have and share that is not detected because it hasn't been detected yet. Fine, let's say that that's the possibility. Let's hope that's the case. But the fact of the matter is, until there's evidence that we've all are sharing some same rare disease, because most of us that are having it are young, healthy. You're still young. In 2000, like you're young right now. 44 is not that. I'm 41, so
Yeah.
we're not that old. We're young guys to be having strokes. And the fact is that there's more evidence that it's these chokes that are causing the dissections. The dissections are what's forming a clot, and then the clot is what's shooting to the brain, and that's what's causing the chokes. So if we can become more aware of that, I think that we could probably mitigate some of the strokes. We might not be able to mitigate as many dissections if guys aren't tapping early enough, but I think if we can identify, because all the black belts, I've spoken with some, after my accident, I spoke with some pretty high-level black belts. One of them was the first European non-Brazilian black belt in Europe, named Patrick Baton. And then after that, I spoke to, in the UK, a guy named Braulio Estima. And both of those guys, when they heard about it, when I told them my story, like neither one of them ever heard anything like it, and didn't think anything like this could ever exist. So when you've got guys like that who've been around the game that long, then and I've been on a couple podcasts where a black belt said, and I have it, I'll send it to you later, but it was a link, and I just took a clip from it. Same thing has happened to you, Demian, happened to this guy. It was a triangle choke, and it was in Miami, Florida. I want to say back in 2012, similar, and it was at an American Top Team, and the guy fell down right after the choke. His was like immediate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the black belt, it was on Jiu-Jitsu Radio. Sean said, I used to tell guys, tap out to an arm bar, tap out to a leg lock. I can't put you back together. You fight the chokes as long as you want, but I can't put you back together. If you break an arm, or he goes. But then he goes, here, thinking back to that guy's triangle, and then hearing your story and other people, and hearing what you're telling me about other people, he said, now that I think about it, he goes, maybe that philosophy isn't so smart. And I'll send you that little clip. I ripped it, and I turned it into a 2-minute clip. So anyways, I think that type of awareness, I think we're on a good start, keeping the sport. We're not trying to disassemble the sport or shut it down.
Yeah.
But if we can mitigate.
Obviously.
Yeah, and the people, going back, there was a comment on Reddit that I just want to read that I really liked, because reading all these, a lot of people seem to be like I said, a little bit skeptical.
Yeah.
And this guy said, so for example, one guy said, strokes like this are highly unusual. But this guy on Reddit said, you say highly unusual, and other posters here suggest that it's incredibly rare, and he has both of those in quotes. But but are these stroke events really so rare? By my count, there are 3 people who have commented in this thread alone that claim to have personally suffered a TIA or stroke from grappling, and others who claim to know somebody. Again, we don't know the specifics of the causation of these cases. Perhaps it had nothing to do with BJJ. That's the answer that we're all hoping is true. I'm merely suggesting that we do not delude ourselves into thinking that these events are just an act of God or a result of performance-enhancing drugs, and thus deny ourselves the chance to consider that being choked or cranked repeatedly could be a contributory cause of some of these injuries / conditions. If there is a risk and one that can be mitigated, wouldn't you want to know? In short, we should ask more questions before reaching a conclusion. If we are seeking the truth and health, why would we empathetically rule out a potential cause without good reason to do so? Absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. And I'm not so sure we can concede that there's an absence of evidence.
And that's again calls for a little bit of research crunching the numbers. I don't know if you've heard, I've talked to a lot of different doctors about this stuff since. And first of all, it would make the act of God thing. What is the most common way people get TIAs, out in life? Car accidents, chiropractic adjustments of the neck.
Okay.
Even like people getting their hair washed at like a haircut thing, like moving the head around like that. So it has something to do with manipulation of the neck. What do we do in jiu-jitsu? We try to choke people with the neck.
Yeah.
The other thing, and you probably heard, is that it may not be the actual strangling that causes some of these dissections. In fact, it could be the release, because there's so much pressure. You're breathing, you're pumping so much blood. When you're strangling that down, and then you let go, and all that blood shoots through, and there could be a way that
it's causing too much buildup and causing
building up and then like explodes through. That is a theory.
That could be mitigated with quick taps.
Absolutely. Yeah, and everybody, you want to see where your boundary is. Like, how much can I take? Like, what does this feel like? So I know. But you're right. If there was a way that when you have a good choke in, and the guy who is getting choked probably has a good idea after a certain amount of training. And if that's taught early, I think you could probably avoid a lot of this stuff. But again, some people are just not gonna believe it no matter what. And internet warriors, you know how it goes.
Fair
people
enough.
are going to be skeptical of everything. Yeah. But I think if there was some power behind the actual evidence, to say, it looks like when we crunch the numbers that doing jiu-jitsu, you have a 10% more chance likely of getting a that means that there's something there. And it would be an interesting study regardless.
Absolutely, brother.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, this is great, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's great being linked up.
Yeah.
And let's continue to, I hope to help you, and